wait a moment. I want to make sure that everyone can hear us.
Sure.
I just checked. Starting again. Are you able to hear us? Oh. Okay, never mind then. All right. Going into roll call. Director Eisenbeis. Director Calkins.
She tell us she was going to miss somebody to not remembering.
Director.
She's just coming in.
Oh, she's just coming to go.
Oh, I'm here.
Okay, I'll circle back then. Director Lane.
Here.
Director Mueller.
Here.
Director Alston.
Here.
Director Second. Here. And Director Johannes. Yeah. And then Director Colgan. Here. Excellent. We're all here. Thank you.
All right, Jim, do you want to cover the executive director's report?
Sure. I mean,
Let's just ask for public testimony.
that's a good idea. Thank you. Sure.
Yes, is there any public testimony?
Sure. No, public testimony.
Other than that, we have any minutes?
I'm just going to be really brief. I left a voicemail for each of you reminding you about what's on the agenda and spoke to a few of you, but I think the reflection I want to share with you is that you've got some real progress represented on your agenda today. Things that really began under the conversations held by the interim board of directors, set the direction, and these are following through with actual implementation of actions. So the Bond Accountability Committee, and we have a few members who will be here or online to say hello. We have an operating reserve policy, and quite candidly, we never had the real option of having an operating reserve before, so we're really excited about that. Significant progress on the strategic plan that you guys have been helping shape. And we think a pretty thoughtful, given the cost of government and taxation proposal around how we can manage our development reviews. And again, progress now on the new purposes spot that Colin and others will tell you about. So just for me, with my time ticking short, it's really exciting and important for me to see that these things are coming to fruition. So your staff will be making our best recommendations about those things. We hope you agree with them. And if you have questions, we hope you'll dive in and ask them. And if we need to change these things to reflect your direction, we're certainly excited to do that. But congratulations to the staff for making all of that happen. And I want to continue to be grateful to whoever's responsible for the dry weather. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think things are going pretty well. And excited to be here today, and thanks for your leadership.
Yes,
Sure, thank you. Jim, I just am wondering if there's any time in the near future where we might expect some safety report out. We
Sure.
discussed over a number of months ago about the potential for some summaries of the status of the safety performance, and I'm still interested and curious about that before the budget season, so we make sure that we have, issues properly resourced, et cetera.
I don't believe we've had any injuries. We had one incident.
Yes, we've been enhancing the program overall, though, and I think what I've seen is there's a lot better reporting of near misses, for example. So yeah, happy to report out.
Yeah. Okay. Other than the fact that we're working on it and drilling on it and practicing it all the time, there's not been anything that we've had to report to the state.
Any other questions for Jim?
We appreciate and focus on safety. Thank you.
All right, the next agenda item is the consent agenda minutes for January 15th. So hopefully you've had a chance to review those. And if so, I would entertain a motion to approve the January 15th minutes. Or wait, yeah, it's the minutes.
The consent agenda script. We will now consider the February the February consent agenda, which includes the January meetings minutes with a correction on page 10 of the packet where it says Director Eisenbeiss recommended keeping the background and reference check for an internal candidate. It should be updated to a recommendation that the district ensure a background check had been conducted at the time an internal candidate began employment with the district. Are there any items that a director would like to remove to discuss and vote on separately?
Madam Chair, I would move to approve the minutes with the correction as noted.
Thank you, Director Mueller. Is there a second?
Second.
Director Mueller has motioned that we accept the January 15 minutes with the edit, and Director Eisenbeiss has seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
So look, you are all in favor, right? Sorry, I didn't wait for you. Okay, thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes are approved. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the Bond Accountability Committee. Very exciting. Board.
Thanks. Today, staff is very happy to make a recommendation on our Bond Accountability Committee. Just as a little bit of background, this is something that was included in the bond measure that went to the voters in May of 2024. And it's a really important transparency tool for our board to make sure that we are making good progress on all of the promises that were in that bond. So we can report back to the voters about the progress that is being made. And so the process that we took, we brought a charter to you in October and made some adjustments to it. We started recruiting for the Bond Accountability Committee in November, sharing that through different partners as well as a variety of mailing lists, just trying to get as much interest as possible. That was open through January 16th. We had 10 applicants that were fully responsive using the criteria that the board approved. A staff committee reviewed and scored those applicants. And first, just want to thank all of the applicants that showed interest in this committee. It's such an important accountability tool for staff, for the board, and for the public. And then there were 5 members that applied that staff is happy to recommend. A few of them were able to join today, but staff is recommending board appoints Edmundo Ariano, Nancy Hendrickson, Keith Hobson, Tricia Kent, and Lynn Lindgren. And this would be to the Bond Accountability Committee. Or is there anything else we should touch on?
You covered it all.
Okay. And I can just, as a few further details, this group will be meeting quarterly, plus doing a field visit with project managers. So they're fully familiar with all of our projects, and then meeting quarterly. The finance team already has financial reports set up that they'll be sharing with the committee. Project managers will be reporting on updates to the projects, and then this committee will be issuing an annual report to the board on what progress is on the projects, communicating the findings, and yeah, I think that is all. If any of the candidates are interested to share any information, or could entertain that.
Yes, thank you. Maybe we'll start with the folks online. Edmundo, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mundo, or I go by Mundo. I'm currently a project manager with a heavy civil outfit. Currently upgrading 11 pump stations out in Tri-Cities in Eastern Washington. So yeah, when I saw this, it seemed right up my alley, something that's pretty interesting. And I live in Portland, so I thought it'd be fun to give back a little bit with my area of expertise. So looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for volunteering. And Tricia, and I think, see, we have a bonus potential bond committee member.
Yeah. I don't know if it'll, there we go. This is Laszlo. Yeah, I'm Tricia Kent. I'm a small utility consultant. And a lot of that looks like helping small rural utilities across Oregon and Washington manage their infrastructure, usually from a financial standpoint, applying for funding, managing the funding throughout the life of that application. And like Mundo, I live in Portland, and this felt like a really great opportunity to see what we're doing a little more locally and on bigger projects than I normally work on. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. And do we have anybody?
I don't know.
So, hi everyone. I'm Nancy Hendrickson. Have to say thank you very much. I'm really glad not to be seated at this table. I have worked on the Columbia Slough for 30 years, and a lot of that 30 years was being partners with the district here in its different forms. So I'm also a resident of Portland. I'm happy to give back to see what great work you're going to be doing over the next several years with the bond money.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else? Keep us online.
Keith, do you want to say anything?
Sure. Keith Hobson. My background is primarily finance and government finance and management, although spent a lot of time in capital program delivery, 20 years at Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation, managing a large bond measure there. I actually was a staff liaison to our bond oversight committee. And I'm currently on the Beaverton School District Bond Accountability Committee. So I've kind of seen both sides of that, and I'm excited to be able to help participate in the project delivery for the program here.
Thank you so much.
So those who may not recall, Keith served as Director of Finance Administration before Lori was hired.
Wow, very good. Are there any questions, comments?
Just thank you all so much for taking the time and bringing your expertise and care to this. It is a really great way, like Colin said, to hold us all accountable and make sure we're doing the good work for flood safety in a way that aligns to our communities and constituents' expectations. So thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you all for participating and volunteering your time. I couldn't be more thrilled with the group that's assembled. So look forward to working with you. Thank you.
And, Director Lane or King, any questions or comments from you? Well, we're really grateful and excited. What an amazing group of people. I don't think we could have found a better people with experience and knowledge and passion about the community. So we're really excited to have you.
And there is an action requested, so the board would entertain the motion. Be great, and I have it printed here if anyone wants it.
Got it right here.
Page 13.
I move to appoint Edmundo Aguero Jr., Nancy Hendrickson, Keith Hobson, Tricia Kent, and Lynn Lindgren to Flood Safety District's Bond Accountability Committee in the initial term of committee service. I'm so sorry. I stumbled on all of those words.
You did great.
Thanks. So really tried.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. All right, it's been motioned by Director Johnson, seconded by Director Assembly too. Director Ralston, it's been seconded. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Robert. We look forward to working with you or hearing from you. And capacity, I'm not sure how our paths and when they will cross, and I'm sure that they will. Thank you for being here. Yes.
I do have one comment. I think in the charter that the board adopted in November, we made a commitment to have one board member assigned to the committee as liaison. And I don't see it on the agenda for today, but maybe it's something we need to put on the agenda for next month and think about who might be interested in participating in that.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So we can have that on the next agenda. Very good. Thank you. Good catch. All right, next up, Corey, you're going to talk to us about the operating reserve policy.
So in your packet today, you have a draft copy of the operating reserve policy. This is the first of 2 reserve policies we'll be presenting to the board for consideration this year. The second policy establishing a capital reserve will be presented at a future board meeting. Today, we'll review best practices related to reserves, talk a little bit about the history behind the funds we have to provide for the initial funding of this reserve, look at the savings generated from having this reserve, and discuss key elements of the policy. The Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, has issued best practices with recommendations about reserves for government entities. One of the key issues that supports the development of an operating reserve is the cash flow risk related to timing of revenue receipts. That should sound familiar because you've heard about the timing of our revenue a few times from me. The district's 2 primary forms of revenue, the property assessments and the flood safety fee, both start after the first of the fiscal year, leaving the district to operate on cash held until revenues are collected. In this situation, the GFOA recommends development of a formal reserve policy and also recommends that staff optimize investment of the reserve funds to provide interest revenue to support operations. The district currently has funds to support the development of the operating reserve. These funds were initiated in the transfer of MCDD to the district in July 2020. This cash balance has continued to be carried and is available to fund the operating reserve. The main benefit to holding an operating reserve is that the district is able to offset timing risks associated with our major forms of operating revenue. This allows the district to continue to avoid the interest costs associated with interim borrowing that would be necessary to fund the first 6 months of operation if these funds were not available. When the interim board was considering how to proceed with the transfer of the assets and liabilities of MCDD, they decided to accept both the available cash and the capital debt held by MCDD. The other option was that MCDD was going to pay off their debt with the cash that they held, and then there wouldn't have been any liabilities that transferred over. This slide shows the estimated interest costs of interim borrowing of $5 million for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, which is probably less than what we would need, but it really does illustrate the impact. This is a conservative estimate of the district's operating budget. The operating budget actually supports the need for about $8 to $10 million in interim borrowing. In this scenario, the district has to pay interest cost on the borrowing and also loses interest earnings on the declining cash balance. The total cost of the short-term borrowing is $4.5 million. These cost estimates are projected to 2029, so we can compare the cost of the short-term borrowing as compared to the cost of the capital debt that the district acquired from MCDD, which is paid off in 2030. MCDD held low interest capital debt that transferred to the consolidated district along with the cash balance. This debt transferred to the district on July 1st, 2024. The remaining interest cost on the debt at the point of transfer was $1.9 million.
In comparing the two options, the short-term borrowing and the interest on the capital debt, you can see that the net savings to the district by transferring the cash and the low interest debt totals about $2.6 million over the life of the debt. The draft policy for the district operating reserve is included in your packet as Exhibit A to the resolution. The policy calls for no less than 6 months of budgeted general fund spending to be reserved on an annual basis as part of the budget process. This reserve amount will be established annually on June 30th to provide the funding necessary to operate the district for the first 6 months of the upcoming fiscal year. The policy calls for board review at least every 5 years. So at this point, I can take any questions that you have about the policy, and I've included the proposed motion language on the slide so that you have that available to you as well. So this is really exciting to me. It's really, I was really happy when the interim board made the decision to allow us to transfer that cash because it does make a significant difference. And as you can see, I mean, $2.6 million is not anything to blink about and certainly will help us in the long term with being able to balance our budget and potentially fund some additional capital acquisition, which is always a good thing. So.
Thank you. Questions, Director?
Thank you, Chair. I'm also very happy that we're considering this, so thank you for your work on it. A couple of questions. One is that in the policy presented, it says the use of operating reserve funds requires approval by the board. So are you anticipating that typically we would be providing that approval on an annual basis?
So yeah, I'm anticipating that we'll provide that approval as part of the budget approval process. So in the budget approval process, I'll have the information on how much the reserve should be to fund the budget that we're taking a look at. And at that point, we would also ask for the approval. Now, I did get another question from another board member about, does that mean that this reserve balance is appropriated? No, it does not. So you'll see in the policy, if there were an emergency situation where we needed access to additional funds, we could come to the board, do a supplemental budget process and ask you to appropriate a portion of those reserve funds. But generally what we anticipate is that we would ask just for your permission to use the available cash to operate within our existing appropriation for the first 6 months. So that balance is not ever going to go away. It will get replenished as soon as we start to collect our revenues. So we're really anticipating that we would live within our budget appropriations each year, but the policy also allows us some flexibility. So if we need to utilize those funds on an emergency basis, we could come to you and ask you to approve an additional appropriation to use those funds as well. Does that answer your question? That was kind of a long-winded answer.
It
But
does. I also have a follow-up question that you provided the segue to, which is for unanticipated needs. Could you talk a little bit about when you would come to the board for approval to use the reserve funds versus using contingency funds?
I think it's going to depend on how big the need is. So the contingency dollars that we put in our budget are typically the $1 million amount. So if we had a significant emergency where we needed to spend more funds, that's when we would look to those reserve dollars and go through a supplemental process. The $1 million that's in the contingency fund is an appropriated amount. So that's an easier budget transfer in that we can come to the board and say, do you approve a transfer of $1 million from the contingency to whatever appropriation line we need that without going through a supplemental budget process. I joke that Lori doesn't do supplemental budget processes because it's very similar to the public comment process that you have to go through with the budget. So we really make a concerted effort to make sure that we're including everything in the appropriations at the beginning of the year so that we don't have to make those sorts of larger changes to the budget. But if there was something unanticipated that was larger than that $1 million amount, that's when we would consider utilizing those reserve funds, and we would have to go through a public comment process to be able to do that. So that would be like a multiple meeting sort of process that we would need to do to be able to move funds out of the reserve to fund an emergency. And that likely would
mean that we would be using existing appropriations and then going through that process to replenish those appropriations to operate for the rest of the year. So if it was a real emergency situation, we likely would call the board members, let them know that we're using existing appropriations, but that we're going to need to be able to figure out how to balance for the rest of the year to get through the year and stay within our appropriations. So that it seems strange that we would, after the fact, be talking about an emergency, but I think if it was a real emergency situation, we would need to move quickly. And so it would kind of be a two-step process. So knock on wood, we'll never have to do that, but the funds would be available if we did need to do so. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Lori, I'm trying to understand some of the scenarios for the use of the money, maybe similar to what Dan was thinking about. And I sort of perceive the operating reserve as a hedge against risk against revenue drops or delays, as opposed to a hedge against unexpected big expenses or events, which would dive into what you're saying would dive into the operating revenue or the operating reserve. So what I'm wondering is it typical to separate out and create different reserve pools? One to preserve the cash flow capability that we need for the first 2 quarters of the year and preserve the ability to handle shocks to the revenue or delays to the revenue cash flow, and a separate one for things like major equipment replacement at a moment's notice. That is it part of a general fund, not a part of a capital project, or even flood fighting that might cost, an extra $200,000 or $300,000 on a particular week. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, do we want to put the operating revenue reserve at risk of being hit up by an expense driven event? And maybe I'm not being clear, but it's.
I understand your question, and I'll have to, let me talk about my motivation for this reserve, which is, I don't believe this board would make this decision, but there's always the potential of getting different board members who would make a decision, a short-term focused decision about, we have fund balance, let's go ahead and spend it. And so one of the things that we did at the very beginning is said, because we're moving this cash over, that really gives us a good solid position and saves us a significant amount of interest expense because we're not doing that interim borrowing. What I'm trying to do is really solidify that by putting forth a board policy that says we're not ever going to eat into that. So the main intent of these funds is to always reserve and set aside that cash that we need to be able to operate for the first half of the year. The best practices really adds those other kind of emergency needs in there just in case we might be in that situation. And because our contingency is really not large enough to be able to support an emergency situation where we were in the middle of flood fighting and perhaps one of our pumps went down and we needed to really do some major work or major flood fighting work, that we might get grant funds for after the fact. And so it's just building in some flexibility should we find ourselves faced with that situation. But the major intent here is that we don't ever make a decision to throw away what we gained when we put this district together, which is we had a good solid amount of, $9 million worth of cash, which is, half of our operating budget and more when we first started, because we started with a $16 million operating budget for the district. So we want to hang on to that. And so this policy formalizes that, and it would take board action to take that away.
And in follow up, I'll say I totally support that and I understand it. And I'm really glad it's here, and I'm glad you're bringing a capital reserve or what reserve policy next time or whenever.
Yes.
Some of my experience with boards or organizations, the language matters. So words like contingency versus reserves, people interpret those in different ways unless it's pretty well spelled out. And even capital project contingency, whether, those attached to a specific project the entire time or to a portfolio of capital projects. So what I'm wondering is, as we go through this, if you could help put each of these individual policies in a broader context so that we can understand what's protected, and what's separated out and not at risk of being inadvertently wrong. Or that we don't have too much contingency or reserve sitting around aiming too low of an interest rate when maybe we have, 30 capital projects, each with their own contingency. But sometimes in different programs, some of those contingencies aren't sort of swept up and reinvested and used for other purposes. So I don't know, Eric, you're over there nodding, and I need some guidance about how to approach sort of the broader picture of contingency and reserves.
So we do have in our appropriations, we have that contingency amount, which has been, it's 1.36 million this year. It's going to go bump back down to our regular $1 million for next year. We had put a little bit additional in this year in case we needed those dollars in relation to the pay equity study, because we didn't know what to anticipate there. That's an appropriation. This reserve will not be appropriated. So it's money that you would have to take specific action and go through a supplemental budget process to be able to spend down. So that is really the difference there. So it would take major effort, both on the part of staff and the board, to make a decision to spend those dollars. We have contingency in our capital budgets, particularly right now, because we're so early in the planning process, that you need to build that in to really protect the district as we're planning out for that construction. As we start to get further along in the design process, what you'll see is that those contingency percentages start to go down. And when you finally do the bid and are ready to do the construction, then the contingency gets even smaller. There's still a little bit, because there could be things that happen during the construction process that get identified where you're going to need those funds. And what you're going to start to see, what we're doing with the long-term, I'm trying to think of a way to term this and not call it a budget, the long-term allocation of the general obligation bond in the state, $20 million in grant funds, is that as we start to identify savings and projects, we're going to take that savings and put it in a common pool. But the transferring of money around in that allocation is going to be something that we'll bring to the board so that you can approve it. So you will always have transparency in how are we identifying what dollars are we spending where and on what projects.
So I'm thinking of the budget process and the decisions we may end up having to make. And one in particular I'm wondering about is if we're going to have enough of a surplus at the end of this fiscal year, because I think we're behind our spending curve, planned spending, if we're going to sweep that and reallocate that, and I'm not saying what we ought to do. I'm just wondering, are we going to have options to maybe put some of those dollars into reserves, or are we just going to incorporate that back into the budget? I'm not quite sure, but I'm anticipating there may be surplus.
We have about $20 million in fund balance for the organization. So 10 of that is going to get pushed into the operating reserve. We won't really know until we go through the audit what the rest of the fund balance looks like, because we have to close out the year. We have to go through the audit process. So we're not going to know beyond the 10-ish million that we'll be putting into the operating reserve, how much is left. As a preview, what we're talking about for the capital reserve fund is if we don't spend the contingency, let's start putting those dollars each year into the capital fund until we build a nice nest egg of those dollars that were in the appropriation but didn't get spent. But the board could also make a decision. There will be other fund balance right now. So my approach to budgeting is, even though we have a fund balance, we typically do not use that to balance our budget. We need to live within our revenue means, because if you eat into that fund balance, it's going to go fast. And if there's an emergency situation where you really do need to pay for something, you're not going to have those funds available to do that spending. So I'm I'm going to encourage you, if anything, we want to sock money away into that capital reserve because we know we have a lot more spending on capital projects than what we have funding for. And we also know that, you know, the size of our capital spending need is so much larger than our operating revenue that it would be difficult for us to borrow money on our regular general fund side of the business to get enough money to be able to pay for those capital projects. So it's going to be kind of a slow process for us to be able to build up and be able to have those funds available to fund even the replacement of the things that we're building right now. So that's the approach. And that's my recommendation, is that really for us, those two reserves are the most important, having that cash to operate in the first half of the year. And then let's start to look at how much money do we want to put away each year to go towards capital.
Thanks, Joe.
Yes. Any other? It's
So that all makes sense. Thank you. It's helpful and detailed. So the no less than 6 months, 50% of budgeted general fund expenditures. I'm not looking at the details of the actual proposed policy, but you said there will be a second policy for the capital.
Yeah,
reserve.
we're going to bring that.
So those will relate. So
Yes.
if we wouldn't carry more than 6 months, like in excess of 6 months, that would go over to the.
I would recommend that what we're going to recommend in the capital policy is just taking a look at the contingency, because we know that that's funds that are available. But certainly there's a little bit, there is some other fund balance that we could look to put into the capital reserve as well, if that's something that the board members would like us to do.
Okay, so it's not specified.
It's not specified.
Go
It's just,
bigger.
so the no less of 6 months for operating reserves is because we know that we pretty much don't start getting our assessments until December. So we need to be able to pay our payroll, for example. And so that cash really helps us to get us through to that point where then we have this big swing up in cash as we start to collect on those assessments. So the capital reserve will be completely independent of that, won't fall within that 6 month limitation.
This is maybe off topic, but as we think about capital reserve, one thing that I will be interested in is, to the extent possible, ensuring that the district has funds available to serve as match toward grant applications and leverage opportunities.
Yes. And this could be used for that. I mean, I will highly recommend we don't spend it for the first 5 years, that we just build it up and don't start to spend it down. But I think that we can definitely work through that as well.
And just to build on Director Olson, so if we had to, in a flood emergency, access through the process described, the general reserve or up the operation reserve fund, we could take out credit to pay the 6 month forward. We could take out debt essentially and pay that higher rate for a shorter amount of time.
It could, it's most likely if there's an emergency scenario like that, unless things really go crazy, which is not true. There's typically some emergency money available either through the state or through the federal government. So that would help to reimburse us for those costs, but this would help us in advance to be able to fund that sort of thing so that we're not having to wait.
Director Lane or Director King, did you have any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Director Mueller?
Yeah, I am familiar with the concept and the type of policy and so forth, and I didn't want to comment on anything until people had a chance to ask their questions and so forth. But I had a chance to read through it, gave Lori a call for a couple of questions, and I just wanted to say that it's something that's very familiar. Also on the budget side, the local budget law wholeheartedly supports, provides for this type of a capability, and indeed, there's an expectation for operating funds that you develop essentially what is your working capital. So in any case, I just want to say I'm wholeheartedly in support of the policy. Glad that we are able to implement it.
Thank you, Director. All right. Thank you. It was a very good, robust conversation. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your your expertise, Director Mueller, too, from a finance, governmental finance background, also giving us the blessing and yeah, I think it's common practice. Hey. It's good to know that we're on the right track. All right. Well, I would entertain a motion.
I move to adopt resolution 2026-0201, adopting a district operating reserve policy effective February 19th, 2026.
Okay, Director Calkins has a motion that we approve resolution 26-0201, adopting the district operating reserve policy effective February 19th, 2026. And Director Johnson has seconded it. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Yay. All right, now we move to the strategic plan. Colin and Matt, we have a preview.
I'll introduce this and then hand it over to Matt. But first, this builds on some work that the board's been working on, starting in earnest with some phone calls ahead of your October retreat, and then a December work session that really dug into what the strategic priorities are for our district and really setting the course for a lot of work that staff will be doing in the coming years. At the January board meeting, the board approved the strategic priorities that came out of those discussions. As that board work was happening, the staff team led by Matt Berlin, who's here, at Andrew Riggs, as well as the CDR team, has been really working hard on building all the pieces, basically, that this will be the foundation for how we go about developing the work that we do. Really, it's setting the trajectory for the organization and really what our strategic priorities are in the next 3 years, and building forward on that. So I want to give a special note of appreciation for the project team. They've been doing amazing work, bringing together staff to really develop all the pieces that will follow on from this. And so this is a pretty important moment. I want to present what the actual strategic plan looks like. And then from there, staff will be developing the level of service, the key performance indicators, basically all the things that will circle back around to the board to show and be able to communicate effectively on what progress is being made, or where we need to spend more time and effort to make more progress. So this is a really important milestone. Excited for the team to present. I'll hand it over to Matt. Okay.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you. And yes, I'm Matt Berlin. I'm the project manager for the Strategic Plan Levels of Service project. I want to bring you all back to June of last year when we met for a work session and we talked about these concepts of levels of service and strategic planning. And the board directors, you were emphatic about wanting to define your roles, about how to stay at a strategic level and not get into the weeds at the staff level. And that really guided this work over the last several months. And so I'm going to walk you through some of the key parts of the strategic plan draft that's in your packet. And we're going to talk about how that vision that we set back in June has shown up in what we're calling the draft strategic plan, and even more so in our approach to defining levels of service. I also want to acknowledge Colin's leadership as sponsor, and Andrew Riggs, who I'm not sure if he's online or not, but our work to really develop something new to reflect the input that we've heard from the board, from leadership, and from staff, and how all of that comes together. We're really excited about it. I also want to acknowledge the expertise of Abby Hall, who I know is on, and Collaborative Decision Resources, who has been integral to guiding us and helping us navigate this very complex, very interesting and creative process. So thank you. After we met in June, we started in October with contracting collaborative decision resources, and they began with one-on-one one-on-one interviews with you, the board of directors, in October that led to the board retreat that we had in this room. Lots of sticky notes, lots of really good conversations about what it means to do the work that we do and how we do it. In November, we took that information, we summarized it, and we brought it to staff. We talked to staff about what the board was thinking, what some of the questions were, the discussions that really fed the early days of the strategic planning process. And we had staff and departmental level interviews that we brought back to you in December at the board work session. And in that, we proposed strategic priorities. We also introduced to leadership the levels of service matrix that we were going to start to develop, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. We brought the strategic priorities back to you in January, and you finalized them. And we also held our first departmental levels of service work sessions. So in this time, we have gone from talking at strategic, very high level to meeting with departments and talking about what we do and why we do it and how we evaluate the work that we do. These are early conversations. There's a lot more to have, but this is a big deal in a matter of 4 months. So it's good to report this. The project goals that we started with for the strategic plan were pretty high level. We wanted to define multi-year priorities. We weren't sure about the time frame, but where we landed was a 3-year project for priorities that would align initiatives with a unified service-centered framework. We wanted to establish levels of service and performance indicators to guide performance and resource allocation. We wanted to create a transparent, consistent decision-making framework. We wanted to strengthen board staff communication and support coordinated governance. We wanted to guide change management in line with the district's expanded mission, build internal capacity for equitable, effective service delivery, and to ensure responsiveness to underserved communities. I think we've done a good job of getting close to that with what we see in our initial draft strategic plan. Some of the planning principles that guided the outcome and the product that you see in your packet. We wanted to be concise, 10 pages of narrative with supporting exhibits. We wanted the document to be accessible, written for the board of directors and an informed public. We wanted consolidation. We wanted to link the district's mission, vision, values with your strategic priorities, community expectations, and then operational programming. We wanted to stay realistic. We wanted to reflect the maturity and evolving nature of levels of service and delivery of service and our evaluation of service. And then we wanted to stay flexible. We want an adaptable model for the new district in this transitional phase to be able to learn and adapt over the next 3 years so that we can approach a more typical 5-year strategic planning process. A really key moment in this conversation was at the retreat when we talked about service hierarchy. We talked about the statute, the Oregon Statute 550, which talks about a number of different things. But in that conversation, we discussed what our core service delivery of reducing flood risk and responding to flood emergencies, and then the other services that help us define how we do those core services and how we provide those services. And that was really integral to starting the construction of our level of service framework. We really talk about reducing flood risk by employing work that improves water quality and fish and wildlife habitat and landscape resilience, or promoting equity and social justice. I want to apologize for my voice. I'm losing it as we talk, so I'm going to keep going. But it is hoarse. I apologize. Another really key moment in this conversation was the development of the strategic priorities. We heard loud and clear that in order to move forward, we wanted to enhance organizational strength, responsibly steward public funds, operationalize all of our district purposes, and sustain and deepen partnerships. The development of these priorities provided the needed guidance from the board that helped to inform how we were going to talk about service delivery at the leadership and the staff level. It also creates the needed linkage to the more detailed levels of service work that we're doing led by staff. So connecting the dots here between what our strategic priorities are, going back to June, acknowledging that the board wants to stay at the strategic level. The linkage is how the strategic priorities inform our levels of service. And that's the key linkage we're going to talk about next. So why do levels of service matter? When we talk about municipalities like ours, we use budgets, staffing plans, equipment, procedures, tactics. We use all kinds of tools to deliver our services, but the community doesn't care as much about those pieces as they do about outcomes. So levels of service then allow us to translate all the internal things that we use to deliver services so that they're relatable to the community. That's what's important. So starting with that service hierarchy, we met with our departments and staff to talk about what it means to reduce flood risk. And our understanding of what the community expects from us is to reduce flood risk by maintaining reliable infrastructure, designing for future climate scenarios, ensuring equity, implementing strategies that improve environmental quality and resilience, stewarding public funds and sustaining service delivery, and informing the public, keeping the public informed about flood risk and the history of our managed floodplain. When we talk about our other core service of responding to flood emergencies, we do so by maintaining readiness to respond, by delivering timely and coordinated flood emergency response, supporting environmental quality when we respond to emergencies, coordinating seamlessly with our partners, providing clear, timely, actionable emergency information, and restoring our system function after an incident occurs. This is the building block for our levels of service and the matrix that we're developing with staff. From this point, we will develop ways to measure how ready we are, how timely and coordinated we are, the work that we're doing to acknowledge and consider environmental quality in our efforts. So what you'll see moving forward is far more detail about the way that we understand our work and the outcomes we expect to meet the community expectations. And the real key concept I want to leave you with here is about maturation. In this work, a lot of us are driven towards having a final product that's perfect. And that's not how this works. We are at a very early stage of maturation. So by the end of the fiscal year, we will have a strategic plan and a supporting level of service matrix that's a start. We will acknowledge that there are going to be some gaps and there's going to be some improvements needed. And we're going to do that work in the first quarter of the next fiscal year so that the next time you have a retreat, you've got more information to inform your decision-making processes. So strategic priorities, if we want to revisit those, we want to refine those, we're going to have more information. The following year, we're going to be even better at it. And so as we look at this 3-year period, we're going to look at testing how the way that we do our work and we evaluate that work and how we report on that work is giving you what you need and giving the community what they expect. So what you'll see moving forward is that the remainder of the fiscal year here, we've identified services. We're going to develop community and technical levels of service towards a complete framework. And then in the first quarter, we'll take an opportunity to talk to our external partners, interagency partners, about whether our expectations match what their expectations are. And that's a continuous body of work where we'll look at that and we'll talk to our constituents over time as we move forward. But we will take the opportunity to have an initial reporting and evaluation of this matrix and how it reflects the work that we're doing. Then we'll take the opportunity to refine the levels of service and key performance indicators that we've developed so that we can help you work through the next fiscal year budget and strategic priorities. And so as we move towards budget season, again, hopefully you'll have more information to inform your involvement in that process. So the draft strategic plan in your packet is written at a very high level. It's written for you, the audience, and for an informed public, right? Someone who knows what we do and why we do it. But what you'll notice is that it's really focused on content. It's not polished. It's not the final product. What we're here to do today is to request your approval of the content so we can move forward and move it to production, where we'll take it and we'll put it in with this wonderful new logo that we have, and we'll brand it, and we'll include the exhibits that we've included in the development over the last few months. And with that, we'll come back with a polished product that you can look at and say, this is our strategic plan for the next 3 years. Anything to add?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Good. you reminded me of a question, which I think you're answering for me in terms of the polish, but as I read through it, at one point I was trying to decide whether the difference in the fonts was trying to communicate some significant meaning for me one way or the other. I'm assuming it's not, that's the unpolished part. That I should give any particular weight to anything.
I was gonna say, I want to assume that it's I think there was a conversion to PDF problem where one of the fonts didn't come through or something, and it looks, I was gonna say just, obviously, this is like, it's the most mild of concern because the content is really readable and really wonderful, and the font is much less readable. But so the content is, I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to.
That was not the polish I was talking about. Someone who is offended by incongruent fonts.
This would have horrified you.
Sorry,
But
sorry.
the content was
But
really readable, which was great. I really appreciated how it was laid out, and I know how tough it is to keep things like this concise, and I thought it was brought together in a really nice way. So I really appreciate what you guys have done on this.
Thank you. I do want to just reiterate how integral Abby and Laura from CBR have been in really finding a way to that final product and meeting the principles that we set forth. So thank you, Abby.
Yes. Thank you for taking us through this process, all of you. It's been, I feel like I've never had a surprise in it, which I think is always a positive indicator. You're really good at kind of tracking us with where we are. And it was helpful to go through the timeline today that you just showed of when and how we'll see this show up and how levels of service and KPIs, when we can expect those. But I think something else I heard from you all in the process, because it was co-created alongside the board and staff, is there were conversations that have led to improvements already and things that are affecting the team and the operation and our output day to day, whether they're formalized fully or not, which feels like a benefit of this process. So just wanted to recognize that as, although we won't see it fully baked until 2027 in all the big ways, it seems like a really positive part of it. And yeah, nitpicky, I hate to be nitpicky, I know it's what we do. I was curious what role visuals will play in the 10-page summary, because I know we've seen it a number of times of like the circles and kind of how things work together, but just in terms of consumability, like I think those can be really helpful to quickly grasp for an educated public or us, just as the reminding anchors of kind of like how these things work together. So I was curious if there's any role for visuals in the output.
Absolutely. I believe, is it the same graphic designer that did so we're working, excuse me, we're working with Drew Meisel. And he has helped us with branding on a number of different products. The graphic that you see talking about service hierarchy is a draft that there's a lot of opinions around it. Whether or not it adequately demonstrates what we're trying to get across, I think it's still up for debate. But yeah, we've got Drew on. An early mistake to make in this process is to have someone do layout when we're not sure about content yet. So that is a part of the process. He does have the draft. He's working on it now. So we're excited to move to that next phase.
Can I add one more thing? Is you'll notice in the list of exhibits, presentation materials. And I think that's just another key piece of the like simple visual version of this that can be used by you all, by the leadership team, by the staff in doing external engagement and framing other more specific projects in the context of the strategic plan and these sort of higher level goals and strategic priorities. So that's very much on our list of deliverables, is to have basically PowerPoint slides that can be used by a variety of people to talk about this work.
Any other questions, comments, or? Well, good job. We are at the county going through a strategic plan. Oh, sorry, Director, I'll come right back to you. But we are going through the process of assigning KPIs. It's a huge process. But I do believe that it will be really beneficial, because again, like you're just setting out these kind of very nebulous goals and saying, okay, but did you meet this particular metric? And it's a way for the public to hold us accountable And it's also really helps directors in our budgeting process to make sure, I mean, it just keeps you completely aligned. So as young as the district is, it's really exciting to see that the strategic planning is, you know, almost from day one being embedded into the organization. So thank you for your work, Abby, and Matt, thank you, and Colin, good job. And Director Miller, did you have something?
I was just going to go with staff's request, which was I would move to approve the draft strategic plan and approve it for production. If that's all you need in the motion.
Second. Second. Thank you, Director Calkins. Okay, it's been motioned by Director Miller, seconded by Director Calkins to accept the review or the draft strategic plan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, man.
All right, next up, regional. It's going to talk about the service charge ordinance.
And Cheryl, we'll give McKenna a brief introduction there. Yes, so McKenna is an engineer that brings great environmental and general civil expertise to our team. She's a supervising engineer on the team. She also administers the development review program. And as part of that, they're always looking for ways to make the program better, more efficient. And she identified this as a potential and brought it forward. I will say that if the board, this is the first reading of what would be two readings. So this item does not have a definitive timeframe. If the board has desired changes, we could go and make those. If not, this would be constituted as the first reading of the ordinance changes for this development review program. But turn over to Ken.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Yeah, as Steve mentioned, I'm a supervising engineer here and manage our development review program. And yeah, just going to go over a proposal to kind of simplify our development review program and kind of associated fee structure. And as Steve mentioned, the revised draft ordinance is also in your meeting packet. So first wanted to just give some background and overview on the program. So the purpose of our development review program is to ensure that new development is not detrimentally impacting the management or maintenance of our levee or drainage systems that we operate. And we do this by reviewing permit applications for projects proposed within the managed floodplain. And to give you an idea of what we look for in a development review, our criteria kind of falls within three categories. So first is access to operations and maintenance. So we work closely with our operations teams to review impacts to our work, which includes reviewing any existing easements or things like that on property. Second would be hydraulic capacity. So any changes that would reduce capacity or introduce new flows into our system need a detailed review. And then lastly would be direct infrastructure impacts. So things like a utility installation that might pass near or even modify assets that we maintain, like a levee. And typically we're notified and review projects going through an overlapping jurisdictions kind of permitting plan review process. Included some logos at the bottom of agencies that we work with pretty frequently on this process. And we have a tiered review process that kind of escalates with complexity. So tiers 1, 2, and 3 going from 1 being the most simple and 3 most complex with how much impact it might have on our system. And we also coordinate with the Army Corps of Engineers for reviews under their Section 408 program for any alterations to the levee system. So this table shows kind of where our current service fees are for the development review program that have been in effect since 2021. And then
going through this, also wanted to just give some examples of what the different reviews under each tier would kind of look like. So the tier 1 review is a very simple review. It ends up really being most applications that we see by volume. An example would be like a utility connection that's in district, but it's just not here in your infrastructure. Don't really care about it. So these don't have an associated fee. They're usually pretty quick kind of approval. A tier 2 review example would be something like a traffic light installation on Marine Drive. So that would need a more detailed review due to the proximity of the levee. We would also work with the Army Corps on that type of project. And for these, we adopted a flat fee in 2021. So there's kind of a base fee or intake fee, and then a tier 2 review flat fee that totaled to $2,220, which was calculated from kind of the average expenses per tier 2 review for us at that time. And then tier 3 reviews are pretty significant, very complex reviews. They're also pretty rare for us. We've only had about 5 since 2018. And a project might be escalated to that for things like really complex easement negotiations or super significant impacts to our infrastructure or capacity. Examples of actual tier 3 reviews we've seen are things like the interstate bridge replacement project or like the Portland Meadows redevelopment into the Amazon facility in the Delta Park section. And these reviews will incur fees based on a cost estimate that we'll provide that goes into a service charge agreement to the applicant, and then they get invoiced monthly as needed and as we're working on that review. So for the budget side of things and where we're kind of looking to possibly make some changes, we took a look at the expenses and revenue over the last 5 years. The yellow bars here representing the program administration and kind of review intake. So this is all staff time, the yellow, and is pretty consistent annually at about $40,000. The red bars then are the project expenses for specific tier 2 or tier 3 reviews. And then the green bars are revenue associated with those specific reviews. So in general, expenses and revenue, as you can see, have been decreasing for the most part, with the exception of an outlier in fiscal year 2024, which was skewed from one specific very large project. Much of the expenses on the individual reviews is also staff time. And a big part of that staff time is really kind of the administrative requirements of putting together our application and our service charge agreement and our invoices, and then kind of just all of the tracking and communication that goes into that process. And so the time required for that administrative process can frequently outweigh the time for the actual technical review portion, which can also delay us approving projects. And with those trends, we've also been seeing less new tier 2 or tier 3 reviews per year. A big factor there is that most of the floodplain's developed now. There's not really a lot of room for big major new developments that would impact us in that way. For reference, we had 10 new tier 2 reviews in 2021, and then last year we had just 5. And so because of that, we're also just not bringing in very significant revenue anymore. So last year's, as you can see, was right around $13,000. And given these low numbers and the increased administrative time needed to keep the invoicing going, we are proposing changes to the service structure. And the main proposed change here is focusing on actually removing service fees from those mid-level or tier 2 reviews, which would in turn reduce the staff time needed for that invoicing process and the administrative portion of the review. And we would still want to maintain service fees for the tier 3 very complex reviews so that we can recoup costs for those. We started thinking about this because
the formation of the new district kind of gives us an opportunity to look at our existing programs and make improvements where we can. We didn't really have a chance to look at the DR program during the consolidation process. A big push for adopting fees to begin with was so that former MCD could recoup staff time costs for reviews done in the other legacy districts, which, you know, isn't necessary anymore. And also just want to emphasize that our DR program is very critical to our operations, to ensure we do the work that we need to do. And so we just want to make sure it's clear that we're not going to change the level of review that we do, or, you know, we're going to be authority that we have responding to this project. We're only proposing to lower the costs for both the district and system. And a more efficient review process for us would also mean that it can go through jurisdictions permitting processes faster as well. And then lastly, just wanted to highlight that our process right now and service fee is the same for commercial and residential applicants. And so eliminating fees here would also make a tier 2 review much more approachable for the residential applicants that we get from time to time. And that was all I have for a presentation. So, yeah. Director, any supplies?
Chair, thank you for the presentation. To clarify, do you anticipate that the administrative cost savings associated with the proposal would meet or exceed the reduction in revenue from no longer requiring a fee with tier 2 reviews?
I think so. I think a big part of,
I don't think I see it because it's going to be our existing staff. So what it's going to allow is for those staff to focus their efforts on other things and not focus their efforts on billing. So you won't see a reduction in budget for the change in the billing. But we really think from a equity standpoint that this makes sense. It's a small amount of revenue for the organization in the big scheme of things. But our staff will be focusing on other things, and so you won't see maybe any sort of a reduction to the appropriations for that.
So follow up, I appreciate that. And just maybe to put it another way is it currently the case that the fee revenue associated with the type 2 revenues or permits is not paying for the staff time associated with administering the fee requirement?
And maybe I'll try to attempt it. And I was thinking the exact same question you're bringing up. I think the challenge is we don't track the difference in technical staff time review to the administrative staff time. But my gut sense in looking at the cost of the administration of the program versus that $13,000, and the $13,000 was tier 2 and 3. So if we split out of the 13,000, how much was just tier 2? My gut sense says that, yeah, we'll be saving more in staff time that can be, it's not saving budgetarily, but it's saving as far as being able to allocate those resources elsewhere in excess of that amount.
Thank you. That's it.
Sort of an issue where they're spending their productivity. We're still paying the staff the same amount for the week. It's just what they're
That's correct.
focus on.
Yes.
Mostly just a comment, not really a question, because coming from a consulting perspective, this is something we deal with a lot. And I can say just like personally how much time it eats up just having to go back and forth trying to get people to sign various things or run through your budgeting process. So I think this seems like a wise move to kind of be able to get things moving quicker. And then also, you know, from the lake perspective and all of that, I'm sure that it's helpful for all of the, like on the residential side, the equity piece of this all. It's very, so I appreciate you got me all bringing this forward. It's really nice.
Yeah, thank you. McKenna, thank you. Appreciate this. A couple of real quick questions. So I'm looking at the development review program overview, and the purpose is to ensure new development does not ... you also get an opportunity to look at redevelopment? And that's included in sort of your population of projects to review?
It is, yeah.
Okay, so, okay, that's good to know. Follow-up on that is, do you have any insight into conflicts amongst jurisdictions over things like engineering design assumptions around stormwater, whether it's, storm characterization or all the rest of it? But so I'm kind of curious around how our overlapping jurisdictions are working together on using common design assumptions or standards for stormwater related infrastructure. And I'm wondering if through your experience looking at these design reviews, if you have a sense of that.
Do you mean us against other jurisdictions or them? Like, City of Portland?
Well,
versus-
just sort of in general, but certainly from our perspective, as we're trying to, do some stormwater modeling and increase the sophistication of that might lead to design recommendations for upsizing or taking into account, more energetic volatile storm scenarios, all that kind of thing. Is the region sort of all in the same plane, using the same assumptions, or is it all over the place? I'm seeing Steve shake his head.
Lieutenant probably knows better than I do, but my experience is, the jurisdictions don't use the same standards, and it's nuanced. City of Portland will use a different method for sizing stormwater pipes. They use the rational method and size it for a specific peak of a storm. Gresham and Fairview and the other East County cities tend to use more of a 24-hour storm event in a different sizing method. So it generally results in a smaller pipe than a City of Portland sized pipe for stormwater. So yeah, they're not exactly on the same page.
So how do we handle that in design review? If we have certain standards that we're looking for capacity, do we go back and spend time working with other cities to try to get them to upsize the system, for instance, or not? We don't at this point do that.
Go ahead. I would say that's something that we deal with from time to time, but it's more outside of the program. If we have, a pipe in our system that's undersized or something like that, it would be more of a discussion with the city on how we can collaborate on that project to upsize it. But I would say for the development review program, we typically kind of defer to what the city's standards are. For the most part, they're all gonna meet what we need. We're just then specifically looking at our own pump station capacity and things like that. So if they're making sure that they're not adding a huge amount of flow or it's,
Access, okay.
and typically they already have actually standards in place anyway that you can, increase the flow by X amount based on the pre and post of your development. And so usually that's kind of accounted for, but there are certain exemptions and things like that that come into play. So it varies, but.
Is there any movement in the region to standardize some of those design assumptions? Not really. Okay.
It'd be nice, but yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, for year 3 and the expenses, is there a bill back for staff time that's used on those large projects?
Yeah.
So that will still be included there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a process point, Madam Chair, because this is an ordinance, there are rules around the ordinance. Appreciate if you would ask if any board member wants the entire ordinance to be read. If no board member requests that, then one of the board members needs to read the title of the ordinance to constitute an official first read before you vote to move it to second reading.
Would any of our board members have some entire ordinance read? No. And so staff is going to title.
Title, and it's on page 55 of your packet. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Someone has to read the title. An ordinance replacing the development review service charge structure and methodology and authorizing service charges to be set by resolution.
Had questions or comments, so didn't know if we were.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in front of your questions. My apologies.
Go ahead, Director Mills.
So I guess, I mean, I understand the concept from a cost saving standpoint. We don't want to spend, $50 collecting a $25 fee, and so that part makes sense to me. My initial reaction when I went through it, and I mentioned to Jim when he called that I was wearing my day hat. I was reluctant to forego a revenue stream, but in the context and so forth, I think it's going to be overall cost effective for us. So I'm supportive of it from that standpoint. One of the things that I was slightly concerned about as I read through the fee for the tier 3, and I had it here, then I flipped it back and forth. Right at the end here. There it is. Okay, excuse me. Under the service charge on page 58 for the service charge for the tier 3, I was concerned about that. It talks about that there will be the cost agreement, and tier 3 reviews will not exceed the tier 3 estimate provided to the applicant. That, I guess, caused me concern. Just my limited exposure, again, with my day hat, is that we end up sometimes with projects that evolve, or the developer wasn't as thorough as they should have been, or any number of other things. And I guess my concern is I don't want to end up in a situation where we end up with a development estimate of $5,000 and end up costing the district $10,000 or $15,000, and some of it being hard dollars that we had to spend on an outside hydrologist or particular engineer or whatever else. And so I was a little concerned about that piece of it, but I may not understand how it actually works. So I don't want to assume that I understand it correctly.
Yeah, that's a good point. That specific portion is unchanged, just to clarify from the original ordinance. That's always how we've done it. And I think mainly it's just coming from a perspective of wanting to be transparent with the applicant so that they know what they can expect if it's, $5,000 or $25,000. Typically when you're applying for a permit or something, you'll get a fee associated with that. It won't be like, we're just going to invoice you each month as we're working on it. So I think we're hoping that with that, we provide an estimate upfront. And typically we try to be conservative with it. So we kind of will estimate our hours, and if we might need legal review or a consultant review, we'll try to estimate that upfront and then build in, a little bit of contingency and give them like a maximum value. But yeah, obviously there's still some room for going over that occasionally. It's something we could think more about how we message that. And it doesn't, we're updating the ordinance now, so we can make changes elsewhere too.
It's not been a problem that I don't want to create when I just.
Kind of, could you describe what state these permits are in when they come to us for our review?
It varies. I would say that usually when it's coming to us, they are, they have just submitted their site development permit or what it may be to the city of Portland or Troutdale or whatever it might be. And so typically the project is somewhere around, I don't know, 30 to 60% design phase. And so it will sometimes take some back and forth, and we'll continue reviewing their design submittals over time. They can sometimes, take a really long time. For tier 3s, I guess I'll just point out again that these are really rare for us. We want to make sure that this is in place, that we can still recoup these costs. But I mentioned we've only had 5 since the inception of the program in 2018. So it's really not something that's happening frequently. We haven't had a new one in years, so we haven't also, sent out one of these estimates in years. It's really infrequent that we need to escalate it to that level. So I do think it's low risk, but
Okay.
yeah.
Great, thank you.
We don't need a vote. You've completed the first read. My understanding.
Did you not want that motion that's on here?
No, because we have to do a second
Yeah.
read.
Motion
Next.
move that the ordinance be advanced to the second reading. I'm just reading what's in the packet.
It won't hurt if you do that. I think that's how we did it last. We don't do very many ordinances. So my regrets. If you're prepared to vote, I don't think it is trouble. I'm not sure it's required. We're getting a new person to coordinate the board who's going to learn all these things. So,
Okay, we'll just do it for fun.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. Move that the urban flood safety water quality district ordinance number 126 be advanced to second reading.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, Director Ralston has motioned that we advance this to a second reading. Director Mueller has seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes unanimously, whether we needed it or not.
thank you. Thank you for your resilient approach to policymaking.
Thank you. Okay, next up. Thank you, McKenna. Good eye. We appreciate you. Let's see, Colin, sorry. The fund grant, district responsibilities fund grant.
Thanks all. So this is something that's exciting. In the creation of the district through ORS 550, there were additional responsibilities of the district included. And that is something that staff takes really seriously. So let's make sure that we are meeting our statutory requirements. We are building in many of these new responsibilities into the work that we're doing. The engineering team and planning team looking at opportunities to find nature-based solutions. The watershed improvement plan that you've heard about, looking about how we'll make investments. We have a set aside in the bond program that is specifically for nature-based floodplain restoration work. And there are some parts of the statutory requirements that there are other organizations already doing the work, community-based organizations and nonprofits, and have the expertise. And we would really like to bolster the work that they're doing, build partnership while meeting our statutory responsibilities and support of them. And so your budget includes a new district responsibility fund. In September, we brought a recommendation to you all, which was to use that fund in two ways. One is to fund some of the planning work that we need to do. An example of that, McKenna is leading a mapping, or sorry, a modeling project for inundation mapping and building out our 2D modeling. We also need to have a conversation about sort of joint responsibility for infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure throughout our system. That fund will support. And then there's also a portion of that the staff recommended being grant funds to go to nonprofits and community-based organizations that are doing work aligned with our mission. And so staff reached out to a few different organizations. And I guess missed one part. We don't have any kind of robust grant making program here. Grant making and grant administration requires a lot of work and time. And there's certain organizations that have already established those types of programs. To build that out would be really expensive for us from an administrative overhead. And so staff recommended finding another organization that would help manage and administrate our grant and partnership funding. And so we reached out. We had meetings with the Oregon Community Foundation, the Meyer Memorial Trust, and the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. We invited organizations to fill out the questionnaire, to share some of the information about how they would meet our requirements and how we would be able to work together. And staff is really happy to make a recommendation for the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District to be the grant administrator for a portion of the new District Responsibilities Fund. There's a few reasons why we think that East Multnomah would be such a great candidate. And one is that they're another government agency. They have a long-term responsibility for a lot of the things that are kind of aligned with our new district responsibilities. They also have experience doing grant making. They have a lot of the infrastructure and staff expertise already there. They are familiar with a lot of the organizations and do work in and around our in the managed floodplain. And then they also are deeply steeped in the public process as a government entity, and so can ensure transparency as well as being able to communicate with the public about progress that work is doing. And so this would be what's recommended would be to develop or to designate the executive director to develop an intergovernmental agreement with East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District to set up this program. And the expectation is that it's about $300,000 to $400,000 a year based on annual appropriations from the board. But it would be a long-term relationship both with East Multnomah and also with some of the grantees to really build the partnership. There's also, it's a joke, but that would, with the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District and the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District, the initialisms are 12 letters and 10 of them are consonants, and there's a really unique opportunity there, but that for the flood safety district. Yes, exactly. But we've had a number of conversations with East Multnomah. They are great stewards of public resources. They really, I think it would be a great allied effort. And it would really bolster and build two government organizations relationships. I think there's a lot of benefits there. We did invite East Multnomah staff, Kelly Beamer, who's the executive director, and Heather Nelson Kent, who is the community outreach and engagement manager. They're here. So yeah, if the chair would entertain you guys would like to introduce yourselves, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Really nice to be here. Jim has been very hospitable. Our board has met here for a few times. My name is Kelly Beamer. I'm the executive director at East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. I was a little jealous to read the doing business as, and you got down to 3. So we have a very long acronym as well. We're a good companionship. Yeah, our mission is to we help people care for land and water. Everything we do is guided by 3 strategic pillars that are soil and water health, climate action, and equity. So listening to your strategic plan, it's just feeling like this really nice vested relationship. And our district is vested in yours. So I'm a big fan of we're stronger together kind of work. And so just want to thank you for the opportunity to submit a letter of interest and apply. And Heather can give you a little snapshot of our grant program, which really helps us execute our mission through culturally specific and grassroots organizations doing the work. So nice to meet you all. I would love to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks for giving us a minute on your agenda. My name is Heather Nelson Kent, and I have a long track record of grant administration, and that's one of the roles that I play at East Multnomah. We award about $2 million a year to organizations, mostly nonprofit organizations, to fulfill our mission. And we have really adopted a strong equity framework for our grant making, and we've really seen
how that's affected who receives grants and the types of organizations and communities that they're engaging and who's being impacted with those grants. So we're really proud of our grant making program and feel like it would be a great opportunity to work together with you and deliver some of those same results. So
thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Questions, comments from the board? Sorry, I'm assuming I have a pack. Usually back next to the room. So I'm just going to be moving around. Questions, comments from the board?
I want to reiterate that because of the amount of revenue, the board would be asked to approve the IGA once we work through the issues with our fellow districts. So you'll get to see it. You'll have to approve the IGA. You're not, when you're delegating to me, you're delegating me the responsibility of developing it for your approval. Just wanted to make sure that step was clear to you all.
Okay, so
You have influence.
are we voting on?
The request is to
direct me to go bring you an
Yes.
IGA.
Yes, okay, got it. Questions or comments from the board? Yes, Director.
Really quickly, I read your application and I'm so excited from the time that we were talking about the purposes and the idea of empowering the communities that are already doing this work to this and having this opportunity. It feels like a really swift movement that is really exciting, and all of your work, just thank you for it. I have one technical question that might be a con question. I think I saw 400,000 in the annual budget. Would the fee for the employees for the soil district be on top of that, or would that be built into that amount?
that would be built into that amount.
So our grant amount would vary.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Unless you direct us otherwise.
I just want to say, as I read through it all, I thought it was a great tool, a great solution. You know, as we talked about the legacy districts, this new responsibility is something that we're charged with, but we have no history, no expertise, no internal team to do grant administration. And so I think this was an excellent solution for that new responsibility. So I was really happy to see it.
I agree. I'm super excited. You all, I think, are a perfect partner for us in so many different ways. And administering grants, well, it may sound easy. There's a lot of details, if you don't know. And having somebody who has expertise, not only in the function itself, but just the expertise that you have that's similar to our missions and how we align is really fantastic. So super excited. So I would entertain a motion.
To approve and authorize the executive director or the designee to develop intergovernmental agreement with the Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District for grant administration.
There's a second.
I'll second.
Okay, Director Miller has motion that we move forward with the Multnomah Soil. Something. I don't have. And Director Ralston has seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
You approve, right, Director Lane?
Yes.
Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, it passes unanimously. Congratulations, thank you so much. Next up,
Share my screen. So in your packet today, you have the December 2025 financial report for the urban district, which includes both monthly and fiscal year to date financial information. So this slide shows the general fund spending results by budget appropriation line. These lines are the appropriation amounts which we are required to stay within in order to comply with Oregon local budget law. The first column you see is the full adopted budget for the fiscal year. The second column is the year-to-date allocated budget through December. So it's about half, a little over, or a little less than half of the adopted budget because we're halfway through the year. The third column shows the actual expenditures through December. You can see in the fourth column, that all of the appropriation lines are less than budget. Thus, we are in compliance with the Oregon local budget law. Good news. Woohoo. Let's keep that up, shall we? For the executive director, the year-to-date spending includes personnel cost and cost related to our management consulting. The positive variance is related to management consulting. We anticipate this positive variance will continue for the rest of the fiscal year. The positive variance in legal reflects the timing of legal billings received for processing and that open position in the division. As a preview, we're actually pulling this position out of the budget for the next fiscal year. We found that things are really working well using outside counsel. They have a very diverse staff that can help us very quickly and has given us good sound legal advice. So we'll be coming to you with the recommendation that we don't continue to have officer in the budget. Finance and administration includes administration, IT, financial services, board services, and human resources. Our positive variance there results from 0.2 FTEs in open positions year to date, although we have filled one of those positions now, which is wonderful. And we have some differences in materials and services spending. A portion of the materials and services difference is timing, but we're also anticipating that positive variance will continue in consulting costs and employee training related costs for the year. Planning and Public Affairs has a 2.1 FTE open positions, along with 0.8 FTE of general fund positions that are working on the general obligation bond, which results in a positive variance for the year thus far. This division is also experiencing timing differences for materials and services spending, including that allocated portion of the $500,000 for new responsibilities for the district. We expect that that will continue this year because for East Multnomah Soil and Conservation District, they'll have to appropriate the funds before they can start spending them. So we anticipate that once we get this IGA going, that we'll see spending starting next fiscal year. Engineering and operations also has a timing difference in materials and services expense, including lower costs than planned for the year for the Salmon Creek dredging project, housing, houseless coordination, electricity, and incident response. Electricity still could pop up because we're in that weather season, although when we look outside right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be a problem today. For general fund debt service, the IFA loan payment for the year has been processed. Let's take a look at revenues. Actually have some action now. So this chart shows the year-to-date budget, which is the green, and the actual revenues for the year-to-date. We are seeing now that things have ramped up with the assessment collections through December, and we're projecting that we'll be on budget at $9.5 million for the current fiscal year. We have 2 quarters of the flood safety fee that have been billed to local jurisdictions, and balances have been collected. Grant revenues are lower than year-to-date budget because of the timing of the design work on the PIR pump station. So I can take any questions you might have on the financial statements. Things are looking good for us. So I'm having another good year. Thank you, Lori. Questions, comments from Lori?
Appreciate it. Let's see those dark blue bars.
Yeah, it's great. It's nice to finally see some revenue on the chart, which explains why we need that operating reserve.
Yes,
definitely.
All right, Colin and Mark.
All right, well, I'll kick it off just with a quick introduction. I think I'll do a federal affairs, federal update quickly, and then, but a lot is happening with the Portland Metro Levy System project, and we have talked a little bit about it, especially around real estate with you, but with so many different pieces moving, even at different timelines. We just want to be in front of the board at least quarterly, just to give an update on where things are and how things are moving along, either in person or as an informational update. So Mark is here, he's the project manager for the Portland Metro Levy System project. He'll get into the update, and then I might just jump into the federal piece. Okay, so I shared news via email, but we are included in a federal fiscal year 26 appropriations for $450,000. That number was very strategic by Portland District and really exciting. It's the first increment for construction of the project. It's for a smaller portion of the construction, but it does change the program from the design or the feasibility side of the core to the construction side of the core. That is the appropriation. There's so many other things going on in DC right now that we don't know exactly how all of that will start and when it's going to start, but it's a really important, signpost along the way that we're moving in the right direction. And so that is really exciting. One thing that is just noteworthy, want to emphasize, that was included in that normally for moving to construction, you have to have a separate congressional authorization for a new start, and this was inclusive in that appropriation. So we'll see how everything shakes out and when things are actually moving, but it's a great, it's a milestone for sure. So pause for celebration. It's great news. And then, so just where are we going now? We're already looking at federal fiscal year 27. And so the Senate has appropriation requests for earmarks or congressionally directed spending requests, as well as programmatic requests. So we'll be putting together requests for that. And then the House side will come in later. We don't know if we'll be included in the president's recommended budget, but we were last year and we may be again. So that is something that we'll definitely give an update on. So we have a federal advocate that works in DC and helps us navigate some of these processes. So she's been giving really good support, and I think our project still remains really well aligned with overall Army Corps of Engineer priorities. So it's great progress.
Thanks. I know that we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try to avoid a whole lot of preamble. But I do want to talk just very briefly about the objectives. I am not sure that we've talked a whole lot about what is in the PMLS. So I'm not going to go into exhaustive detail. I'm going to hit the high points, and you certainly have a great set of slides in your packet that can kind of deep dive a little further. We're always willing to take folks out or answer any questions if you have more details. So I'm going to just stress the sort of the objectives, where we're at, what our timeline is, and what our next steps are and who we're engaging with. So this is sort of a very preliminary thing. I think we all know why we're here. I think we know that we started this effort with Levy Ready Columbia a long time ago. We did a lot of levy engineering assessments, and we realized that we needed help. And so the Corps of Engineers is doing that. I kind of want to pause really briefly and just speak to the relationship that we have with the Corps. I have been on this project for 7 years, and it continues to get better in terms of our relationships with the Corps, with the folks that are on the Corps that are working with us. There's not a lot of trust in the federal government to some extent right now, and but our partners are solid. And even if we're all playing monkey in the middle between a lot of competing external forces, the team that I'm working with, we have built a really solid relationship. When I bring things to them, they do what they can. That includes some of the very important stakeholder and partner work that we are doing to try to make sure that this project doesn't just fit for a federal. We're redoing a federal levy. Yes, check the box, but there's a lot more involved in that. There's a lot of municipalities and there's a lot of groups. There's some residential communities. So I think we all know that this is helping us address our needs to address some of the fragilities that we have identified in the past, to improve our internal pumping capabilities, to deal with both Columbia River events as well as pluvial or internal drainage events. And this project's also going to help us solve some of our FEMA accreditation concerns. I think everyone is well aware that this is very important. We continue to do this work with the federal government. If we did this on our own, we wouldn't be able to do it at the same scale because we are getting a 65% cost share from the federal government. So that is pretty substantial. The total project cost there is about 182 million at the current estimate. I will say that we are about 15-ish% at the 15% milestone. We have not gotten to 30% on all our plans, so I'll show you that in a moment. Obviously, the objectives here are to improve the performance of the system, to reduce the life, safety, and economic risks to the system, to improve the redundancy and resiliency of the system, and to improve the operation of the system. It also, again, does address some of our FEMA accreditation needs. These are some of the measures. This is sort of a highlight look at the measures that we are taking. The recommended plan is called Uniform Level of Protection, and that means that we're focusing on the perimeter levee, making the outside of the castle stronger. We know that there are some things that can be done internally, some of the cross levees, and there is one cross levee that we are addressing because of the magnitude consequences if that cross levee fails, as it did in the 1948 Vanport flood. That's the one that protects the district formerly known as MCDD West, now known as Middle Columbia Slough. So the primary emphasis is on the exterior of the system. There are some low spots that have developed with time, and there are pump station upgrades. 3 to be exact, 3 substantial pump station upgrades to their capacities. The Corps only focuses, their policy only allows them to focus on external pump stations, things that move water out of the system, or in the case of one of the pump stations, like very proximally close to the outer system. So that's a pump station 2. So I'm going to show you some slides, and really at a really high level, you can study these. We can go into greater detail, but the premier problem in the system is the most notorious, and that is the railroad embankment. There's a lot of uncertainty behind it. The Corps did additional work on the railroad levee embankment, the ad hoc levee embankment, after the failure in 1948. There's also 2 other locations that failed in 1948, which don't get as much press. But this is the most uncertain because the railroads have not allowed us to drill them, touch them, see what's inside them so that we understand them better and can model them. So we are building a parallel levee, setback levee. It is one of the 2 most complicated projects because of the inner workings of the city of Portland and because of the natural resource and recreational impacts that this setback levee will need to navigate. The areas formerly known as Penn 1, now called Vanport, and Penn 2, now called Delta Park, that is where the majority of the work is being done in the system. Those 2 systems are the lowest in the system, and so to bring them to a uniform level of protection, there are a lot of levee raise and flood wall raises in that system to get them more comparable in level of protection to the eastern portion of the system, which was modified much later on, or built much later on, developed. So there is a so the railroad embankment is the primary one in Delta Park, Penn 2. The premier kind of the other big challenge in the project, one of the more complicated portions, is that Columbia River levee along Bridgeton Road and Marine Drive, where we're working hand in hand with the landowners to raise that levee to provide that uniform level of protection. And obviously that's very complicated. It's very expensive. There are a lot of utility relocations. There's a lot of public engagement. We started that effort years ago and we continue. I usually attend quarterly neighborhood association meetings along with Francisca and others. Amber Ayers, who is presented to you on the real estate portion of the project, is heavily engaged in this area as well. So that is the other really big design component. In Penn 2, Delta Park, there's also the 13th Avenue pump station, which is receiving a major capacity upgrade. and potential replacement. And then kind of on that borderline there, there's that cross levee on the right side of the screen. That is the one that is right adjacent to us, and that is getting basically thickened and in order to improve its performance. We move into the Middle Columbia Slough section. Also right over here, Pump Station 2 is seeing a major capacity increase and potential replacement. And that that section that Colin mentioned, that starter project, is in the center top of the screen, Route Beach. There's a low spot there. It's an itty bitty project, but it is a great walk before you run kind of thing, so that we exercise all sort of mechanisms of the system before we go other places. Further east, you can see the work dwindles. A lot of the risk to the former MCDD comes from the west, from that cross levee and that cascading failure that we saw in 1948. But there was a pump station upgrade, trash rack upgrade, which we already completed, and we'll be receiving in-kind credit towards that 35% that I mentioned. And then finally, former SDIC, now known as Salmon Creek section, there is a levee raised by the Troutdale Outlet Mall. There's significant levee enhancement on that northern perimeter levee, and then we'll have the replacement, long overdue, of the Sandy Pump Station. And addressing a low spot. So happy to go over any details. I think that probably kind of gives you a really good flavor of the type of work that costs $182 million to complete. This is a very general timeline. The actual Gantt charts that we use are kind of dizzying, but the overall point of this is that we will be in design for a significant period of time still. The next year or two are very critical for design. There's a lot of work to be done. The Corps of Engineers is engaging an AE contractor design firm to help them with those two big components that I talked about, and they'll be putting that out to a large task order here in the spring. So we will also be asked to put out a task order for the relocations in one of those projects because the Corps realizes that it's not really good at dealing with natural resources, golf courses and public facilities to the same extent, and that we're better at engaging our partners. So you can see the actual boots to the ground stuff happens a little further out. There's that small levee construction that happens at the top of the screen in phase 1. Then we'll see Sandy Pump Station come along. Then that phase 2 involves all the intermediate levee work and those two other pump stations. And then we'll finish off with that very complicated Bridgeton Road project. So somewhere in there, we're uncertain, will be the coordination with the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project. We're sort of playing kind of a coordination game with them. Obviously, there's uncertainty there as well as to not just their implementation, but their timing. So who comes first? We certainly don't want to build something and have them rip it out to build there. So we attend regular design meetings with the IBR. And I installed. Okay. Okay, yeah. So I mean, I'm basically towards the end of it. I really want to allow some time for any questions, but the next thing is what is next. So we're going to continue to do that design work. We're going to continue to do that public stakeholder engagement. As I mentioned, there we go. There is intense coordination with the city of Portland through a regular task force. We have time allotted every 2 weeks. We don't always use it, but we meet with them regularly. We meet periodically with the East County Working Group, which is sort of a similar thing for the board and some of the municipalities out east, as well as Metro, and make sure that we're aligned. We'll be signing that public partnering agreement currently according to schedule in summer, early fall. We are moving forward. We purchased our first real estate acquisition, as you all are aware of. Thank you very much for helping us move forward on that. We'll be doing some environmental site sampling, so we characterize. So there's one potential site that we're aware of that has a potential for some environmental cleanup to avoid near a shipyard. And again, we'll just be moving forward with a lot of this important design work. So I hope next time that we come to brief you, we'll have some exciting news about all of this design work, and that will be, barreling towards 30% on some of our first packages. There are actually, I said there are 3 phases. That's sort of our outward facing timeline, but we actually have 7 different design packages that are moving forward. So each one of those is about a 30, 60, 90%. And we're engaging on that. So thanks very much for the opportunity to share all this with you. It's pretty exciting.
Thank you.
Sprint through it. Nice.
Questions, comments?
That was great.
Yeah.
It was really, I feel like this is the first time seeing all those visuals and having you voice over them, that I was actually able to you guys have shown us this stuff a lot of times from how the actual floodplain is, where the pump stations are, but it was really helpful to weave it all together to understand the kind of layers of the project. So it's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Sure.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, well done, and it was really useful. Thanks.
So.
Yeah, I thought it was great too. So we definitely will see more of you. So maybe we can have more time to. We didn't give you enough time, but I would have liked to have had more time to go through the slides, but it was really, really good. So we'll have you come back.
I appreciate that, and certainly if there are things that you are specifically interested in, or things that you need more unpacking, be happy to prepare for that.
I guess one thing really quickly, Colin, you said that the Army Corps dollars that were approved were to go towards construction for this year. Is that right? Did I hear that wrong?
The federal fiscal year 26 appropriation is for construction.
And what is that? I got confused based on the timelines for a second.
That's the $450,000, and that's for that small levee section that Mark showed that was basically right above the airport.
Okay.
And so it is the smallest increment package of the project.
Yeah.
But it's a start.
Bureaucratic hurdles, getting dollars in the construction account.
Right.
That saves us an act of Congress.
Great.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Colin. Okay. Well, we are just past 5 a little bit. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
We have a quick one just from my side. I know I'm in a unique position of being tangential to the Fairview Lake group and also here. I don't know what the best way is to share information like this, but I know I saw a post recently, I get information from Bob Dolphin also on the Fairview Lake Property Owners Association. And so he shared that there's a community outreach event soon coming up to the watershed improvement plan. I know it would be helpful for me, and I know that this information exists in multiple places, but it would be helpful for me if that could be sent out at least to me. I don't know if anybody else wants that information, but those kinds of things to be highlighted in some way, just so that I would love to be more physically present at events.
And so I think there's probably 2 ways that we can commit as staff to get this. One is sending that directly, especially if it's in your neighborhood or of general interest. And then what the public affairs team is going to work with Jim for the ED report is to have basically a community events calendar, because there's also outreach events and things that we do routinely that maybe you just want to, pop in on. And so just having that as part of the ongoing executive director report, what we're
that'd be awesome. Yeah, that would be awesome. Anything like that would be for sure.
I'll try and actually be proactive when I hear about these things.
I mean, and particularly for me, anything, close to Fairview or that might impact Fairview Lake.
Sounds like a fair request.
just so
I do want to do it and I know we're late, but we're chasing a few more responses to the work session potential reschedule. So we've heard from many of you, but there are a couple that we're still waiting on. And then, so I think probably next time we'll be able to have a conversation where staff will be in a position to recommend a course of action. So thank you for your patience with that, Eric. And I know you've been consistent in wanting to determine if there's another time that works for everyone. So you can attend more regularly. So we're getting pretty close on having enough information. Tell you whether it's possible or not.
So has everyone completed that?
Organizing that, sorry.
Has everyone completed that?
We were waiting on a couple more, so we're working on.
Who are we waiting on?
I'm not-
I was gonna ask you, Zach, did I complete it?
Really committed, hardworking people.
All right. All right. Look at it, Linda. If you haven't responded, please do. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your time, and it was a great meeting and very. Thank you. Thank you.
Good one.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.